Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the One Talk podcast. You're here with your host, Ryan McCarthy. And today we are joined by Jim Penman. Jim is the founder of Jim's Group, which has over 5,000 franchisees, going from Jim's Cleaning to Jim's Mowing and so much more. Jim has built this empire, and within today's episode, we touch on the journey of building Jim's Group, also the mindset required to take it as far as he has, and also what he sees in the future with Jim's Group. Even though he's been doing it for quite a fair bit of time now, and he's built it as such a great piece of growth, he still talks about where he wants to see it go in the future. Because starting Jim's Group with a $24 investment, now overturning $500 million annually, it's just an incredible story. Also, Jim has a PhD in history. He's the author of multiple books, and one of them is Epigenetics and Character, which is the biology behind history. And the biohistory is a revolutionary new theory that explores the biological and behavioral underpinnings of social change, including the rise and fall of civilizations. And also Jim is the author of Biohistory too. And within today's episode, we touch on one of Jim's passions in life, funding and creating new ways to create longevity in health, because we've all heard of longevity in life. But what's the point of longevity in life if we don't have longevity in health? So Jim is super passionate about finding ways to stay healthy for longer. And within today's episode, I can't wait for you all to check it out. In other news, if you could please leave this podcast a rating, it means so much in terms of helping this podcast grow and reaching a larger audience. If you're on YouTube, if you could subscribe, if you're on Apple or Spotify, if you could leave a rating, it would mean so much. But without further ado, let's welcome Jim.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. The marathon continue. Victory lap tonight, though. Victory lap tonight.
Welcome to the One Talk podcast with Ryan McCarthy.
The marathon continues. That's what you would say.
Welcome to the One Talk podcast, Jim Penman. How are you?
Oh, great. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing really well, thanks, mate. Thank you for sharing your time today and coming on the podcast. It's much appreciated. Getting you on the podcast today, like everyone knows, Jim, you're a very household name within Australia, and everyone knows Jim's Group, Jim's Mowing and everything like that. But I want to dive into first a lot of the other side of the work that you do. And to begin with, I'd love to talk about epigenetics. And for myself and the listeners here as well, I'd love to understand what is epigenetics and what's the importance of knowing the information of epigenetics.
Okay, epigenetics is the effect of the environment has on the way your genes function. If you think of genes as a whole string of little taps, and what these taps do is spit out a protein. That's how they are. And that's a messenger that says, go and do this or have that effect or put that thing on, turn it off, whatever. What epigenetics is a sort of is a system that either turns these taps off or turns them on. It opens them up. So turning it off would typically be what's called a methyl group. It's like a little thing that sits on there and says, okay, let's not have so much of that stuff coming out, or let's not have any of it. So what happens is you get influences in the environment, which is not only in your own life, but also in that of your parents, grandparents, even great-parents, grandparents, which determine how a lot of things like your character, your ability to do hard work, whether you think long-term or short-term. It's a new field. It's just only in the last decade or so that's really come of age, and the tools are getting better all the time. But it's the key to change. If you could look at a person who's got a problem with drug addiction, okay, genetically speaking, there's nothing wrong with them. It's the environment, maybe them, maybe their parents or something got them screwed. And if you can go in and you can just turn off a little few taps like that, you've got somebody who just doesn't have the same urges, who's positive, who can work, function in the community, who can be a good father or mother, those kinds of things. And the way we're doing this, the particular area we're looking at is the effects of mild food restriction, which we're studying in rats in particular, and we're looking at, and these kinds of changes are known to have a very beneficial effect on people. For example, mild food restriction helps people to be healthier, to live longer, to get less heart disease, like cancer. And it also as far as we can say, should cause people to think much more long term. So thinking in terms of getting education and what's good for me. So someone like a drug addict will think very short term. They'll think, what do I feel like now, right now, even though I know I'm going to be really bad, tomorrow and next week. But if you can get people to think longer term, you can help them to recover.
And what are some of these tools so we can access it, so we can start getting the benefits of it in life?
Well, basically what you need is a treatment of some kind. So for example, we've got a cellular system being set up. We know that the epigenetic effects of food restriction, we've been studying this for years. So we know what the epigenome looks like. You can study these things. And we know what genes are affected by it. So what we're doing is setting up a whole lot of cells in culture. And then you expose them to up to say 100,000 different medicines or things have come from treatments of some kind. There's lots. You can get them on public databases almost. So you put that in, and you have to look to see how do you get the epigenetic effect that you're after, and then you get something that looks okay, and you test that on animals to see if it has the right effect. And then if you get some very good results, then you can start trying it on people.
And the benefit of that is that if I take it and my wife, for an example, the benefits will then pour out onto our children and potential future generations.
Well, for example, if you did this, if you fooled your body into thinking that you were mildly food restricted, you'd be a better father and a better husband, because typically that's associated with that. You'll be more interested in your children. You'll be less likely to stray. Be more interested in your wife. More sort of pair bonding, this kind of thing, because it's a sort of thing that promotes monogamy and parenting.
Does the food restriction also apply with like intermittent fasting or fasting practices?
Yeah, it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, because it makes sense, because I like to practice intermittent fasting, and on the times that I do, it's usually when I feel the most best. It's usually when I feel the most focused, when I can have a lot more sharp attention.
Yeah, that's right too. Similar effect to anything that gives you an immediate burst of enjoyment, like drugs or alcohol or junk food, tends to have the opposite effect. So if you're going to reverse that, it's like an anti-drug. And whereas having a drug makes you feel good in the short term but really bad long term, this would have the opposite effect. You wouldn't necessarily be bad short term, but you're feeling much better long term. It just improve your general mood.
So like for yourself, do you practice fasting or food restriction yourself? Like what does that look like day to day for you?
Oh, I practice 16-8 basically, which means I don't normally eat until usually I try and have my last meal at 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock sometimes, and I won't eat until say midday or 1 o'clock the next day. So it's usually a bit more than 16 hours. So I have all my meals within a sort of 7 to 8 hour time slot.
How long have you been doing that for?
Oh, a few years now. Yeah. It's not so much, I mean, it's not really for weight loss, because I never did weight. I've always weighed about 66 kilos, which is 22 BMI. But it's supposed to be good for you in the sense that it's this thing called autophagy, in which if you don't constantly feed your cells with food, all the nutrients all the time, it goes in and they grab all the rubbish and they recycle it. But they say, okay, we need a bit more, so we'll get this. So it cleans out your cells. This is the basic reason for doing it. It does tend to mean you'll eat a little bit less, but you get very used to it. Sometimes I get a little bit hungry in the morning, but you don't just work and forget about it. It's no big thing.
Yeah, usually it's only like a 1 hour window, maybe a 30-minute window where you really are hungry. But once you push past that, you're usually okay.
Yeah. What do you do? What's your pattern?
I'm the same as well. I'll do the same as you. So I do 16-8. Sometimes I'll do 18 fasting, but I usually love to do on the 16. That's when I usually feel the most productive, especially like with mental clarity as well. Like just mentally, I feel so much better, and physically, like inflammation drops, and you get so many other positives come from it.
Yeah, it's good practice.
Yeah. And like with that as well, like what do you eat within that 8 hour window though? Because it's not like you fast for 16 and you can start eating Big Macs. Like there must be certain nutritious food that you must eat within that 8 hour window.
Okay. Basically, government health guidelines, which I try and stick to, is you have 6 serves of vegetables a day and at least 2 pieces of fruit, like an apple or something like that. 6 serves is basically 450 grams of vegetables, and that's including things like legumes, carrots, Brussels sprouts, lettuce, but not corn and not carbohydrates. So that's I try and stick as close to that as possible. I'm not saying I always stick to it, but I have close to that, and I also eat a lot of fruit.
That makes sense. Is health and wellness, like, has that always been a high value of yours? Like, when did you really start to discover you really wanted to have longevity with health?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to have short lifespan if you actually give people a choice. But I think you'd say I get more concerned with time. Look, it's not just a matter of living longer; it's also living better. It's health span, not just lifespan. I mean, you could live. My mother lived to the age of 93, but oh my goodness, that was not a good old age. She was overweight. She was depressed. She had dementia towards the end. She didn't even recognize me. And I used to see her every week for years. She just forgot who I was. And it was a terrible old age. Now, I'm a lot younger than that, so I'm still just 72, but my health is amazingly good, far beyond what I could have expected when I was younger. I have full of energy. I just run for the sake of it. I pace up and down. I really find it hard to sit still at times. My mind is very active. I'm interested in new things. I'm launching new ventures. I'm still bursting with new ideas all the time. I drive people mad. I read a couple of books a week, and I'm always coming on. So you've got to read this, got to read that. If you actually subscribe to my newsletter, which you can see through Jims.net about Jim, it actually has some of my reading amongst other things. There's just a whole lot of stuff that I'm interested in all the time. So I have this amazingly just energetic, happy frame of mind. I'm in a really, really good mood virtually all the time. Not elated, but just contented, just positive, just enjoying life, looking forward to it. I've got a lot to achieve in the next 20 years. There's so many things. I'm working on about 4 different books. We've got all sorts of ventures going. We've got all kinds of things happening. We've got a research program which is building up. We're spending several $1 million a year on this epigenetics thing. So there's so many things that I need to do. So I can't afford poor health. God's given me a very full agenda for the rest of my life.
That's awesome to hear too. I think that's inspiring, especially for myself, because instead of looking at longevity in terms of lifespan, but longevity in terms of health span, I believe a lot of it comes down to the decisions that we make in today, like in the present moment, and how we start building blocks to create a better future for our health and wellness.
Health span has a lot more to do with the diet, though, too. Obviously, exercise. I would do every day. I do weightlifting and run for a half an hour. And I usually probably walk 4,000 or 5,000 extra steps on top of that. So very good exercise. Also things like I don't smoke and drink alcohol and so forth. But also social relations are very important. Being lonely can be as bad for you as a packet of cigarettes a day, which is saying a lot. So I have a very active social life, but I have close connections. I have a life group that I coordinate for my church, where there's about usually about 10 of us, 10 12 of us meet for dinner every fortnight, and we sort of share and we have a meal together, and we pray for each other's needs. And I have another group that meets on a Monday night, and then I have my family, my kids that I see fairly often, including the adult kids. So I've got a good relationship with my wife. So social relations are really important, and I've actually taken a conscious effort to make sure that I do have a good social environment as well, not just for my sake, for the sake of everybody else's too.
Yeah, because
And there's having a sense of purpose in life, which is very important. I just don't believe that it's good to be happy, but you shouldn't live you shouldn't have happiness your purpose in life. Your purpose should have something greater, like for my research, for my franchisees, for my family. And once you look after those and you absorb yourself in those kinds of then happiness tends to come. But it should never be your main aim.
yeah, I feel like if happiness is an extension of your mission, your purpose, or whatever it is that is the core purpose, and happiness is more genuine, fulfilling. I feel like if you do go and chase happiness, then you may fall off path and start doing things that produce short-term happiness rather than the long-term gratification by staying on your path.
A very typical statement of alcoholics or drug addicts is the purpose of life is to be happy. See, what's going to make me happy now? So yes, I'll have the drink, I'll have whatever it is. But that's because if you look at happiness as your main aim, then you will think short term. But if you think, okay, what do I need to achieve? Who's depending on me? I look after me. And then you won't do that, because now in the end you will feel better. It's like money, for example. Okay, People think that money, if you have more money, you're going to be happier. Well, it's not particularly true. Up to a certain level, if you have less than about the average Australian income, about 75 grand a year, you're going to struggle. If you've got more than that, it doesn't make as much difference as people think. But what does matter too is how you spend it. So if you're spending it on status goods, like I've got a bigger house or a better car or more expensive holidays, which I can, and then you plug yourself up on Facebook to see, get lots of likes and show what a great life you're having. If you're in that competitive mind space, that does not create happiness because you're comparing yourself with other people. But if you spend money on interactions with people, on relationships, on eating out with your family and with friends, for example, it doesn't have to be expensive meal either. Then it's much more likely to achieve real lasting happiness. But actually, the number one way to spend money if you want to achieve happiness is to give it away to a cause that you're involved with in some way, and then you're doing something for other people.
Yeah, I feel like when you are in service of other people, that's super fulfilling as well. And
Yes.
yeah, and I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who said this, saying comparison is the theft of joy.
Yeah,
So if you constantly
exactly.
are, if you
Social
constantly are
comparison is
comparing,
theft of joy. I love that. I love that statement. I'm writing a book called tentatively The Health and Happiness Handbook, and I'm definitely going to quote good old TR.
yeah, give them a shout out.
And that applies to everything, though. It's not. It applies to what you spend on personal consumption goods to display, but also things on like Facebook, going for likes and stuff, and having followers and this kind of thing. There's no satisfaction there. Our minds aren't designed to give happiness out of that, because there's always somebody who's better than you, seems having a better life than you.
And I feel like a lot of people are trying to compare themselves to others rather than comparing themselves where they are now to where they want to be in life. Like
Yes.
they get too caught up on the external without actually looking within.
Yep, you did right.
Yeah.
It's a science, actually. I've it's from my own experience, but I've also read a great deal about how these things work and how the mind works. And it's very different to what people think.
Like that whole journey of like looking within and being on the path of knowing self or knowing your mission or knowing your purpose, like what does that look like for you?
Well, I have a very strong sense of calling as a Christian as to what God's called me to do. I very strongly relate to the parable of the talents. You know, the more abilities you've got, the more responsibility you have to use that. It's like a gift. It's something entrusted. Now, I'm not if you know the story, the 1, the 2, and the 5 talent, I don't think of a 5 talent person like a Bill Gates or Elon Musk or something, but I've got my own level of ability, and God expects me to do the best I can with this. I don't compare myself with other people. I don't need to be the richest person around. I'm far from that. But I need to be achieving the best of what I'm capable of. That is important, and my goals are multifaceted. My research project, my family, my franchisees, looking after them. There's my 3 principal goals and loyalties.
And I always find when you are on track with those things, I feel like it does really breed long-term happiness, like we're talking about before, when you continue on your mission and don't get distracted.
Yeah. I am. My wife says I'm like one of those, those plastic things with a weight in the bottom, and you knock it over and it just springs back. I'm like that. I'm very resilient. Something goes wrong, I just, okay, what was my mistake? And I do make terrible mistakes, I can tell you that. I look at it and say, okay, that's a mistake. Learn from that one. Now what do we do? What's the steps? And then you just move on and you deal with it.
I like quickly before we go into that as well, I just want to touch on a topic we just touched on before we move on. You touched on like money doesn't change happiness. I want to hear like with your own story with that, like when you first started to build Jim's group and you started to see the financial starting to grow, was it a shock for yourself when you had that realization, or did you kind of understand that beforehand?
Well, I always knew I needed to make money. The basic thing was because I did my PhD in my 20s, and I thought the ideas that could change the world, and it was incumbent on me to do something about it. Now, I didn't think in those days of making money because I thought I'd be an academic and I'd publish and I'd write and I'd talk and this kind of thing. But then when I came to the stage of basically completing my PhD, I realized I didn't have any prospect of any kind of academic career. And also, although my theory and my research was basically in things like history, cross-cultural anthropology, all the implications were in the biological sciences. We didn't know about epigenetics in those days, but in terms of biology and brain function and so forth. So at that stage, which would have been in 1982, I realized that somehow I'm going to have to become rich enough to fund a multi-million-dollar research institute. And at that stage, I was $35,000 in debt and didn't own a house. And I had some very crappy old mowing equipment and hardly any money. So it would have seemed a very long thought that I might, but I just felt I had to do it. I just had to.
Was it like really being able to trust just that knowing within you that this is the path you have to go on? Because I've heard you talk a lot on like other podcasts and content that you've created about you've always done what's right and not what's easy. And it's continuing following that. So you find you've had that intuition feeling or that connection with God in a sense where it's just more of a knowing, or is it something you have to search for?
Well, I mean, I have to say, I try to always do what's right. I don't think we ever find they always do what's right.
Yeah.
I certainly do things. I was in an argument with my franchisors this morning about something, and I got very heated and noised. So we try hard, Ryan, but we don't always succeed. But yeah, look, the strange thing about it is that so often when you do the thing that's the right thing to do, it's actually, even though it costs you, in the end, it pays off. I just don't think you can put God in your debt. It's like something like paying tithes and stuff. If you look at it as a purely material thing, you'd be better off if you didn't give away, 1/10 of your income. And yet it's a divine commandment, so you just do. And somehow I believe that it just rebounds to you. You can't lose. You can't put God in your debt. And the same thing with many decisions. Like when I started franchising, I was determined I wasn't going to sell a business to somebody that I thought had any reasonable chance of failing. And I knew that because when I used to sell lawn mowing grounds previously, and I remember one of the people who take out the new guys to show them the ropes. He came back to me and asked me one day, I'll never forget this conversation. He said, "What happened to so and so?" Mentioning 2 different people. And I said, "Well, they both failed within 6 months," because I used to keep in touch with them. And he said, "I thought so." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because when I took them out on the road, they weren't good on customer service. They weren't doing a good job." So I was determined, even though when I was selling a business, I didn't ask that. I was determined if I was going to sort of franchise, I wasn't going to sell to somebody who didn't do a good job and I thought might fail. Now, that seemed to me financially a pretty poor decision. And it's one reason I never thought the franchising system would work that much, because if you sell a franchise to something that doesn't work out, well, then you still got the money. You're still better off. You get the ongoing fees, you get the upfront cost, and maybe you're wrong anyway, so they might turn out. So it would seem, financially speaking, that you would be better off taking everybody, which is normal in this industry, in the service franchising industry. But I just couldn't do it. I just thought it was wrong. And I thought, well, okay, I'll never make this thing really big. Because in those days, I didn't really think this would be a huge business. I thought I might succeed at something else, but I didn't think this would be so successful. But I thought I can't do what I think is wrong by putting somebody on who's likely to fail. So I had this policy from the beginning, and we still have it today. If you want to sign a contract, the actual trainer, I've just implemented this as a process, has to actually send a written response to my document department saying, "This person works well in the field. I have confidence in them." And the trainer has no motive to lie. They're not paid to pass somebody. We just paid them a bit to take them out and show them the ropes. So before they can sign, they have to have this statement coming back to say that, we think they're going to succeed. They've got the right attitude. They're physically okay. They've got the right mental attitude. Customer service is good. Communication is good in the field. Yes, okay, this is the right kind of person. Now, the interesting thing about that was that what I didn't realize at the time was that having people who were overwhelmingly successful was actually going to be a fantastically good sales tool. Because what I used to do, these days, if you're going to start a franchise, you've got to give a prospect a list of current franchisees. That's the franchising code. Wasn't about in those days. Nobody did it. But what I used to do was to give a list of my current franchisees with their phone numbers. And when somebody come to me and they say, why would I buy from you? Because you're running a business from your basement, and here's this company that's got much more franchisees than you, and they've got this fancy office and stuff. So I say, okay, well, there's a few differences, and I wouldn't bag them. I just say that we run it a different way. But here's a list of my franchisees. I want you to go and ring them. Ring as many as you like, ring all of them. Complete list. And then I want you to go and ask for their list, which I knew they wouldn't give because they couldn't give. Because the point is, my franchisees overwhelmingly liked the situation. So it wasn't me selling them, they sold. So my very anti-financial decision to not accept somebody I wasn't certain about in that and other ways really helped my business to grow.
I feel like having those foundational blocks as well probably eases off some of the pressure with managerial control, like making sure that the reputation is still good and making sure that people are still working good, because you got those blocks there to begin with.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. You know, we're just in the process now. You're the first person to ever hear about this, but we've got a independent surveying agency to actually survey our franchisees directly. And we will not know what any individual franchisee has said. We've made it clear that we don't want to know. You won't tell us, and they've got to actually state this. And we're going to get all these results. We're going to ask questions like about how satisfied they are, how their income is, good, satisfactory, poor, would they do it again, this kind of thing. Just a few basic questions. When that results come out, we intend to post them on a public website and promote the heck out of it. So we're going to be completely public of what our franchises really think about. And it's going to be a challenge to every other franchisor to do the same thing. Now, I've asked the government on many occasions, I said, this is what you should do. You should have independent surveys done of every franchisee and post them. And then that would really do so much to make franchising ethical. So we're going to do that. And I've got reasonable confidence that we're going to get a good result. Most franchisees are happy, and most are making pretty decent income. But I'm prepared to put it out there.
I was going to say, you must be excited to see what the reception is going to be. Like, whether it's learning curves or whether it's full of positive feedback, like either or, it's overall a win for everyone involved.
I know. You have to be confident to do it. But we're going to be doing every division separately, so people will actually see that some divisions have got a better income than others. If you look that way, so there's going to be some uncomfortable results, but it's pressure on us. We actually survey our franchisees internally every year. The franchisors don't know, but that's mainly so we can find out whether the franchisors are doing a good job. Are they ring them regularly, which they're required to do, at least monthly, ideally weekly? Are they responding really fast? Are they helpful? And then questions about income and training and meetings and so forth.
And like when it first started as well, like when you first started with Jim's Mowing, what really inspired the fact to be able to branch out to so many different areas like Jim's Cleaning and all the other branches that you've got within Jim's group?
I don't think being inspired is quite the word I've used to describe it, Ryan. It was when we started off, we thought it's working well for mowing. Let's try cleaning. But then we thought, okay, here's this guy with a beard and a hat. That's a gardening image. Nobody's going to want to have that image if you're a cleaner, and especially if you're a female cleaner. So we got this thing called Sunlight, S-U-N-L-I-T-E. So we used the same system, and then we branched into Sunlight, and I sold a couple of franchises, and we couldn't find the work. So eventually I gave them the money back and said, look, it's not working. We can't find you the work. And then somebody came to me and said, what about Jim's Cleaning? And I said, well, no, this is a guy with a beard and a hat, which is me. In days when I had a beard and I was a lot younger too. This is a gardening image. This is how I used to wear when I was gardening, because if I've got fairly fair skin, and if you're walking on a tree, the broad-brimmed hat gets knocked off. So that's what it looked like gardening. And I had a beard. So I said, it's not going to work because it's a gardening image. You've got to see that. And he said, no, well, I think it's going to work. And I said, I don't think it's going to work. And he said, well, okay, what if we do it ourselves? So eventually he persuaded me to give him a go. And it worked because he would go into a property manager or someone and say, we're from Jim's Cleaning. And they said, oh, Jim's got the mine. Oh, all right, okay. So it worked. So I was kind of surprised. Most divisions, people come to us. I don't think of ideas. Somebody comes to us and says, I'd like to drive this. Like 3 years ago, one of franchisors, Bill Cobanoglu, wonderful guy, who was very successful in cleaning, said, I want to start Jim's Laundry. Now, so we've now got like 150 laundry franchisees.
Wow.
That was just something he'd come up with. I didn't even think about such a thing. It's good. It suits, women, part-time mothers, and all kinds of things. It's a good division for that.
100%. I feel like it's been a really good thing. So a lot of people usually just pigeonhole themselves into one area. I feel like if you are someone like yourself who's a creative who likes to learn the hard yards, but also try and up the level of, I guess, reputation in each field and try and make them better. I feel like it is a good idea to branch out into other divisions and other types of work.
Well, very little of that's my initiative. The initiative that I do is mainly about improving systems performance and efficiency, better software, better systems, better, like this business I was just telling you about. I mean, we had seen some very great failures in the sense of people being put through as franchisees who shouldn't have come through. So I've just made it informally. I just talked to documents and everybody else, and I said, this is what I want to do from now on. You've got to have this to make sure that every franchisors are doing their job. I think most of them are pretty good, but there was one lady who bought a dog wash franchise, and she was completely incapable. It was just totally beyond her. And within the 2-week cooling off period, she actually said, "This is hopeless. Give me my money back," which we did, of course. But the point of it is, what I discovered afterwards, that the trainer who'd taken her out had actually reported back to the divisional franchisor, this lady is not suited to it. And that was ignored. And that was really shocking. So that's why I've instituted this, so everybody has to do this check. So this is the kind of thing I do all the time, every day. I give every one of my franchisees, more than 5,000, my direct phone number, direct email address. And I encourage them to ring me anytime. I've had multiple people contact me just today about different kinds of issues. They do it all the time. And the great thing about that is not only can I help them in various ways, but also it tells me what's going on. Are you getting poor support? Why is the software not working correctly? You've got to be in touch with the grassroots. And I also deal with complaints regularly, all the time. And I look at why are we getting this complaint? What can we do to fix it? How can we improve our systems? How can we improve our software? It's a constant driving process every day to say, how can we improve? Better service to franchisees, most of all, better service to clients, which helps franchisees to get more and better work. And also within those constraints, obviously, we want to increase our efficiency.
I think that's such an important piece right there as well, like franchisees having your number directly, because I've seen in the few workspaces where there's a big distance between the person working and the CEO, and the process to get a message from the grassroots to CEO, sometimes the work can get watered down on the way to the CEO, and it may take a few weeks. And by the time they receive it, it may, like, you know what I mean? Like, things might have moved on, things might have been different. Someone's taste in their mouth might be bitter. So for people to actually be able to contact you directly, I feel like also contributes to the success that you keep having. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it really, if you don't do that, it can go badly wrong. I know one of my another service franchising company, I won't say who, actually set up this division for ironing. And what actually happened, it was a pure Ponzi scheme. They didn't actually have any ironing jobs. What they would do is they take the money and then they go and get work from the Salvation Army or someone like that. And they would hand them out and they would pay them for doing it. So it gives the impression there was work when there was none. Now, people have been trying to alert the guy in charge to what was going on, and he just didn't listen. And it was a terrible, terrible scandal. It was outrageous what they did. But it just wouldn't happen in gyms because we'd find out very quickly because people would tell me. Now, I make a point too. We've got training next week. I will make a point as far as possible to speak personally to every single franchisee there directly on at least one occasion. And I would tell them I'm going to email you in a month's time. I'm going to ask how you're going, and I want you to reply to me. I'm going to be really hurt and upset and insulted if you don't. And you can ring me anytime. Daytime, evenings. I had a franchisee ring me on Christmas Day just to say Happy Christmas, but that's okay. So I really encourage them and urge them. I say it's so important that you let me know. So not only make myself available, but really urge them. And then when they do contact me, I respond really fast and I do whatever I can. But sometimes they want something that I can't give them and they want to change the system. And I say no, but I always respond.
Well, if you want some live feedback here, I've got a friend who actually has a Jim's mowing, and he's got nothing but positivity to say about
Good.
Jim's
Good
group.
stuff.
So,
Good to hear.
yes, but do you feel like a lot of this falls back on having strong values within the company? And if
Yeah.
so, what are those values?
Our top value is service to franchisees. It's if you look at the founding idea behind Jim's group, is Jesus washing his disciples' feet. And this is something that was very demeaning in those days, in first century Palestine. Something that a slave or a very menial person would do. Occasionally, a very revered rabbi, the disciples might wash the rabbi's feet. But for Jesus to offer to do it for his franchisees was extraordinary. So that idea of servant leadership is very powerful with us. And people often ask me, am I proud of having, 5,000 plus franchisees and this kind of stuff? And I say, really, the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that that value that I have, that I hold, is so widespread. And I see it all the time. I see examples. Remember I talked to you about this guy, Bill Cobbin-Oakwood, the one who started the laundry division. Okay, now this is a case that come up, had a franchisee who died, who was in one of his cleaning franchisees who died. Okay, now that's awful, it really is, because he knows this guy. It's not like he's a stranger. And there's nothing left of his business. There was no clients, there was no guru, there was nothing. But you know what Bill's done? He's arranged it so the next sale that takes place, even though it's not a real sale in any reasonable sense, there's undersell, he's going to sell on behalf of this guy and give the money back to his widow. And that's just the kind of guy he is. He's just an incredibly decent human being. And I have to say that most of my franchisees are very good people. They really are. We had somebody come out from the UK years ago to a franchisor conference. There's a guy called Bill Duckett. Now, he'd been involved in dozens of different franchise systems. And he said, he came to our national conference and he said, I've never seen anything like it. Your culture is so different. And it's this care for franchisees, which is so strong. And it's wonderful. It doesn't just apply to franchisees too. It applies to franchisees too. Like during COVID, we had a terrible time here being cut off and not being able to work for 2 months. It was very traumatic. There was one poor girl who was a dog wash, and she was an overseas student, so she had no income. She was forbidden by law to work. She'd been faced with eviction. She had no money for food. And you know what? The other franchisees, who were themselves without proper income, they rallied around and they gave her food vouchers and all kinds of things. And she came through it fine. She said, last time I heard she was making $5,000 a week, so she's done well. But that was a terrible time. I had people ringing me and say, look, I've got no work, but I'm not badly off. Is there anybody who needs help? I heard this kind of story all the time, and it was just so moving. And I know when somebody goes in, and I hear this all the time, they go to meetings and the mentor, the experienced guys there will take them under their wing. They'll talk to them and they'll help them, and they'll talk to them after hours. Sometimes they'll spend like half an hour just talk to them in the evening to give them advice, not paid. We have a system where we have voluntary mentors, franchisees who volunteer to help anybody who needs help without any form of payment. They can they can ring, talk to somebody who understands, because you don't always want to talk to your franchisor. So, and people volunteer for this. They really do. There's just so many wonderful, wonderful people. And I think, look, they're good people anyway, but possibly we attract a better kind of person. I like to think we do. But also, I think the culture itself tends to create that. And that is, to me, a source of enormous pride that people really care.
Like you said, their culture is so important, especially within the company, eh?
Yeah. People often take it up more than I would too. They'll say they want to suspend this person's fees for this and this reason. And I say, well, no, it's not really part of the guidelines and I wouldn't do it. But, God bless you if you think you should. It's your income. So they do. And that happens reasonably often. We had during the lockdown, again, one of our competitors, not here in New Zealand, actually, they insisted on charging their franchisees fees when the government refused them permission to work. Nobody in gyms, if anybody suggested that, they put into a loony bin. But we had situations in Australia where it was just difficult to work. And the franchisees insisted. They said, "No, I don't want to charge them fees in that period because it's just a bit harder than usual." They just had that kind of heart. I didn't even think it was sensible. I said, "Well, you probably should," but they just said, "No, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it." And they because they care about people so much.
That's amazing because like even to get to this point where building the culture, building the community, building all these great things within a company, it all started with you creating something and then being able to delegate areas that when your strong suit so you could grow the business and grow the company. But that point of delegation, I want to ask this question because I've had a few people who are on business on this podcast and also some of the listeners. Did you struggle with delegation to begin with, or were you more than happy to get people in to support and grow this?
Well, Ryan, I have a peculiar advantage in this respect, is I'm a pretty incompetent at doing just about everything. I mean, honestly speaking, I'm not even much of a gardener. I can mow a pretty good lawn and do the edges neat, but as far as understanding what plants are, I haven't got a clue. So even at that level, I wasn't particularly skilled. And when I started, I'm not the best person personally. I haven't got the best social skills. I often offend people all the time, and I'm not much good with figures, and I'm not really much of a manager, and I don't have a lot of skills. In fact, I'd say the only two things that I'm reasonably good at is communication these days, and I'm very creative. I come up with ideas all the time, but I have to get people who could do these things because I can't do it myself. See, I think some people are so capable that it's really hard for them because they want to do everything themselves and they run out of time. But I find it very easy to give jobs to other people because I just can't do them very well. So that's one reason I'm so easy to contact. If a franchisee wants to contact me, they can, because I'm not actually doing a lot of other things that a normal CEO probably would do.
That makes sense because like if you were trying to do everything all at once, you'll end up burning yourself out and trying to do too many things. Like if you're on social media and then doing all the editing and writing all the things up and then doing podcasts, run Jim's group, like eventually you'll have no time for yourself, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't believe that it's right or proper to bury yourself and work all the time. You've got responsibilities. You've got to have time for my wife, for my children, for my church, for things that matter, for my research project, all those kind of things too. It's not, life is just about making money. I don't think it should be a primary goal. It's only a way to achieve other things.
Yeah, 100% agree. And before, like at the end of each podcast, we have a community Q&A segment. But before we get into that, I've got one question from myself I'd like to ask. And it's because I know you're very heavily interested in history. You got a PhD in history. I'd like to know, what would you want the history books to say about Jim or Jim's group?
I'm trying to develop a treatment that will change the course of human history, that will make human existence enormously better. What I would hope to be remembered for, if at all, is that. I don't think anything else I could achieve would be on that level of importance, because this could affect the lives of billions of people. That's it. And frankly, I don't really care if I'm remembered. What I do care about is that it can be made to work.
That's amazing. Yeah, especially if you are, funding research, doing research, working with people, creating something that's going to change the lives of billions. Like, what better way to get your name in those history books?
If I'm going to be remembered, that'll be likely what it was for. Because I don't know, I would hope. I'm taking a lot of measures to try and keep the culture and special things of Jim's going after I'm gone. I'll probably another 20 years. I'm given my pretty nearly perfect state of health, but I'm setting up a trust system, which is actually some of the money will go towards my children to help them with having families themselves, because I've got 10 kids, so they're getting a bit of assistance there. But most of it's going to the research foundation. So we're setting up a family trust, which will include some of my children who can choose themselves, a couple of people from Jim's group, including franchisees, and also somebody from the research foundation. So hopefully it'll keep going in some form after I'm no longer around, and hopefully the culture and the values. Because one thing I'm very nervous about is that somebody would buy Jim's and just use it to rip money out, which will be quite possible. I mean, if you took over my company and said, how can I really make money? You could make a fortune short term. In the end, you destroy thousands of lives and you do terrible things, but it's been done in the past. And that's what I most fear. One of the things that's going to be in all my contracts, there's going to be a clause that says that the controlling share of Jim's group cannot be sold to anybody without the written consent of a majority of franchisees. Because I want to protect my people, even if I'm no longer around to protect them.
Yeah, I've actually wondered that too. Like, because, some people, they'll grow a company to a certain size and sell it off to maybe, like, let's just say an example, an overseas investor. And I started to think, like, with yourself, maybe you didn't do that because you wanted to keep growing it, in the sense of, because the culture is great, you can do great things with it. And also you can do all your great work in the research to potentially help billions. Because one day, if investor group does come in and buy it, like, the quality could potentially drop. And that makes sense when you said that, because that's something that I've thought about as well.
Look, let me be blunt about it. We make pretty good money. We make about $10 million a year profit. Okay, most of which goes straight back into investment in the business and my research foundation. I only live on $200,000 a year, quite very tiny fraction of that. But our fees on average are about 6% of turnover. The typical franchisee in gyms makes a bit under $3,000 a week. This is based on surveys. So that's about 6% what we charge them. Now, if you look at different systems like Johnny King, for example, or James's, they have a system where they take 15% of turnover, which is not outrageously high. There's people who take more than that, but that's for a typical similar business. Now, if I could work out a way, because I'm controlling the contracts, to raise our fees from 6 to 15% and take that to the bottom line, because it wouldn't take much extra cost. Instead of making $10 million a year, we can make $50 million a year. Now think about that. That'd be basically likely $1 billion business. So you could actually make a lot of money if you said money is my first reason for being. We could make more money from 1,000 franchisees with higher fees than we can with 5,000 plus. But it's never been the first thing.
Because it sounds like you are future-proofing it in that sense, but do you think more so culturally as well?
Well, the culture's got to continue. But I have some very great kids. One of the advantages of having 10 children is that between them and partners, I think there's a very good chance the next generation is going to be pretty good too. My kids have made some amazingly good choices. They really have. I love my sons-in-laws and daughters-in-law. They're just fantastic people. They're almost better than my kids, I think. Some of my daughters are very good looking, so I don't surprised they managed to attract the best kind of guys. But they really are very, very decent human beings. I think there's a very good chance that the next generation will do a pretty good job.
That's amazing to hear, because I assume that becoming a father is probably one of the greatest achievements in life.
Oh,
and
yes.
My wife's pregnant at the moment, about to have my first kid at the end of this year. So an exciting journey I'm keen to take on and explore and
Good man, you're in for a wonderful journey. How many do you intend to have?
Well, me personally, I'm like yourself. I want as many as possible, but I've told my wife it's up to you. Like, whenever you feel physically you're ready to not continue with having more kids, then yes. But ideally, I'd like 3. But yeah, 10 would be awesome too.
Depends a bit how old your wife is. I had my last one, my wife was 40, and that was pretty good. That was really, I wouldn't have like them to keep on coming, but there is a limit. But I'm 10's good. I got such wonderful children. It's a enormous joy. Your children are part of your sense of purpose in life. I feel sad for people who think that making money and status and prestige and fancy goods and big holidays is more important. I mean, I started having kids when I was completely broke, in debt, mowing contractor, wife a student, single income, really in a very primitive position, crappy old car that was on its last legs. I just wanted kids. I wanted that to be part of it. And I love my children so much.
That's great to hear. But we'll get into our community Q&A. We've got 4 questions that are pulled together from some of the ones that came in. And the first one is, what does downtime for Jim look like?
it sort of depends what you call downtime from what. I don't really distinguish between, to me, something's worth doing or it's not worth doing. Now, you can spend time in business which is not worth doing, and you can do things that are, like I drive my son to school today and pick him up, which is about an hour and a half out of my day, you might say. But in that time, I talk with Aaron, and he's a wonderful, wonderful kid. He's just turned 15, and that's glorious. That's great joy for me, and I think it's good for him too. He's got this amazing, creative, fertile mind. I mean, he's a bit lazy, but he's a great kid. So, and then I read a lot, and most of what I read is kind of, books about, it could be about psychology or current affairs or happiness or anything, evolutionary psychology. I mean, I don't know, is that work or not? I don't really know. Sometimes the things that you do because you're goofing off are more useful than the things you could possibly do working. But I get an idea, I get some notion that helps the business. And, well, obviously exercise. I work on my farm. I like growing quite as much of my own vegetables as possible. I really enjoy working on a farm. And I also play far too much computer games. So I got this old-fashioned game called Conquest, which I like because it only takes about 10 minutes to go game, so I can play it just in the gaps. So I waste time too, believe me. But social life, church, time with my wife, who is incredibly wonderful, gorgeous as well. So very, very much like her. 23 years of marriage. So yeah, I'm very lucky, man.
Awesome. Yeah, but it sounds like you've got like loads of different things that you do and that fulfill you, especially with church as well, because that's such a core foundation to a lot of it too, I find.
I do waste a lot of time, Ryan. I honestly do. I'm not as dispersion, I think.
Well, we're here in life. We may as well experience it.
Yeah.
Our next question is, what's been something you've learned about yourself in the growth of your business that's allowed you to maintain the level of work?
Well, work is fun. I mean, business is like you can imagine a computer game, and which is an endlessly fascinating computer game with lots and lots of levels and great bosses and different scenarios all the time, and just endlessly interesting, challenging, absorbing, and you get paid to play it. I mean, is this good or what? It's not really hard. It's not really hard to work when you love what you're doing and it has so much meaning. So I don't think maintaining my interest. The problem I have is not so much work because my business is so fun. It's trying to discipline myself to do things like work on my books. I'm doing one on the declining birth rate and what can be done about it. And that's quite hard because you've got to think a lot and you've got to study things, and so I can get very lazy about that. But sometimes I just have to, pray, ask God to give me strength to do what I need to do, and don't stop. And sometimes I beat myself, you idiot, you lazy slob, get off your backside and do something useful. I mean, a bit of self-talk. It's probably not very good psychology, I don't know, but works for me, I guess, sometimes.
Well, sometimes I light a fire under us, so. Our next one, I think you've already answered it, because it's like, what's your core values that you attach to life? I believe we've already answered that one. So I can move on to the last one, and it is, at the age of 25, did you envision you'd be where you are now?
No, my life's gone in very strange directions. At the age of 25, I expected to be an academic, really. I thought my ideas were good, actually. I guess a big disappointment has been a lot harder to get people to accept them than I thought. To me, they're so obviously the way the world works. It's a theory of history and society which is based on biology. To me, it's very self-evident. But I have certainly, people all over the world who are interested, who believe in what I'm doing. And we've got a lot of supporters, but it hasn't got the widespread acceptance that I would have thought. So in some ways, becoming quite well off is very surprising, but in other ways, not having yet achieved academic recognition, scientific recognition is disappointing. And I tell you what, when I was younger, I had a big ambition, which I've never ever realized, and that was to be a science fiction writer. So that hasn't happened. So sometimes
We might be getting the book soon.
Very differently to what you expect.
But Jim, I just want to say thank you for coming on the One Talk podcast today. We appreciate your time. I'll leave every single link for the books, research, and also Jim's website in the bio of this episode. But Jim, thank you for coming on.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Good to be here.